Could this be the royal betrayal that shakes Buckingham Palace to its core? Could a single signature, scribbled in anger and determination, unravel a marriage that the world thought untouchable? Meghan Markle has signed the divorce papers. Prince Harry, the once rebellious royal, is contemplating a return to the United Kingdom. The timing, the emotions, the stakes, they are explosive. And the ripple effects? They could change the monarchy forever. Imagine the moment Meghan held that pen. Did her hand tremble? Did anger surge through her veins? Was it relief, defiance, or a combination of both? The world may never know exactly what she felt, but the consequences are undeniable. This is not a simple divorce. This is a seismic shift in one of the most scrutinized royal relationships in modern history. Every move, every whisper, every leaked document will be analyzed and debated for years to come. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But why now? Why, after years of drama, charity work, media scrutiny, and personal sacrifice, did Meghan decide this was the moment to finalize the split? And why does Harry, who once swore to stand by her side no matter what, now appear restless, perhaps even ready to return to the country he once fled? The truth is, the royal world is a delicate house of cards. One wrong move, one misstep, and it all collapses. The monarchy has survived centuries of upheaval, scandals, and heartbreaks. Yet the storm that Harry and Meghan are creating feels different, more personal, more immediate, more destructive. And while the public debates loyalty, duty, and love, behind palace walls, the tension is palpable. Advisors whisper in darkened corridors. Princes confer in private offices. And Meghan and Harry? They're moving on paths that may never converge again. Let's rewind for a moment. Think back to the early days. Harry, the golden boy of the monarchy, charming, rebellious, endlessly protected by his family and the press. Meghan, the Hollywood actress, strong-willed, ambitious, and unafraid to speak her mind. When their worlds collided, it seemed like a fairy tale. The public adored them. The media, initially enchanted, soon turned its gaze into something darker, more intrusive. Every outfit, every public smile, every private moment leaked or scrutinized. The narrative became more about conflict than love, more about scandal than compassion. But love in the royal family is never simple. There are rules. There are traditions. There are expectations that transcend personal happiness. Meghan and Harry challenged all of them. And for years, their rebellion against the crown, against protocol, against the unrelenting media, became both a statement and a shield. But shields can crack. Rebellion can become exhaustion. And anger, when bottled too long, becomes decisive action. The divorce papers are not just a legal formality. They are a symbol. They are a declaration. They are a culmination of years of tension, heartbreak, and relentless pressure. Meghan has reached a point where the only way forward was to sever the tie formally, legally, and irreversibly. And yet, even as the ink dried, the questions began. What comes next? What does Harry do? Where does he go? And how does the palace respond? Inside Buckingham Palace, the news reportedly sent shockwaves. Advisors scrambled. Private conversations became strategic meetings. The monarchy, usually slow to respond to internal crises, had to act, and quickly. Every leak, every whisper, every rumor had the potential to ignite public fury or sympathy. And public opinion matters more than ever. The royals live in a modern age where social media dominates narrative. One misstep, one poorly phrased statement, and decades of tradition can unravel in hours. Meanwhile, Harry is said to be wrestling with his own inner turmoil. The California life, the media freedom, the escape from relentless scrutiny, it all comes at a cost. Family connections fray, relationships strain, and the pull of the UK, of the place where he was born, raised, and trained to serve, grows stronger. But returning isn't as simple as boarding a plane. Every step is calculated, every public appearance scrutinized, every action dissected by the press and the public alike. And then there is the human element, the emotion. Because behind the headlines, behind the palace walls, behind the lawyers and press releases, there are real people feeling real things. Meghan, furious, resolute, perhaps even vindicated. Harry, conflicted, torn, unsure whether home is a place or a concept. And the extended royal family, facing a crisis that could redefine their legacy and their public image. Let's consider the stakes. A divorce of this magnitude is more than just a private matter. It is a story of loyalty, betrayal, ambition, and identity. It raises uncomfortable questions. How much of love is sacrifice? How much of duty is obligation? And how much of family is chosen versus inherited by birthright? These are not just philosophical questions. They have tangible consequences. They determine public perception, influence succession narratives, and shape the future of the monarchy itself. And just when you think you understand the magnitude of this story, another layer emerges. The children, Archie and Lilibet, innocent in many ways, but now caught in the crossfire of adult decisions. Custody, public appearances, education, safety, every decision has weight, and every action carries consequences that could last a lifetime. The stakes are deeply personal, yet the world watches with relentless fascination. But perhaps the most shocking element is the timing. The world expected conflict, yes, but a formal divorce paired with a potential royal return? That combination promises unprecedented drama. One act signals independence, defiance, and closure. The other signals reconciliation, responsibility, and the lure of heritage. Together, they create a story that no royal observer could ignore. So here's the question that haunts every palace corridor and every royal analyst. What will happen next? Will Harry's return signal a new beginning, a reconciliation, or further chaos? Will Meghan's decisive action inspire admiration, fear, or contempt? And how will the monarchy navigate this storm when the winds of public scrutiny blow harder than ever before? The answers are not simple. There is no script. There is no rehearsal. Every move is made in real time, with real consequences, and with millions watching. And while the public debates, speculates, and shares memes, the real story unfolds behind closed doors. Every decision, every conversation, every glance could tip the balance toward harmony or disaster. Could a single signature really ignite a firestorm capable of consuming a dynasty? When Meghan Markle signed those divorce papers, the reverberations weren't just felt in California. They rippled through London, Windsor, and every royal palace in between. This wasn't a quiet legal formality. This was a declaration, a breaking point, a final punctuation mark on years of tension, public scrutiny, and relentless pressure. The moment the papers were signed, palace insiders were said to be in shock. Advisors, who had spent months trying to anticipate Harry and Meghan's next move, suddenly realized that the game had changed. The narrative was no longer speculative. It was concrete. And the implications? Massive. Legal battles would ensue, public opinion would swing, and the monarchy's image could face one of its most challenging tests in modern history. What drove Meghan to this point? People often assume it was simply anger or frustration. But the truth is far more complex. Imagine years of living under a microscope, where every outfit, every word, every gesture is dissected, criticized, or misinterpreted. Imagine being told how to behave, when to speak, and who to trust. Imagine defending not just yourself, but your family, every single day. The cumulative stress, the isolation, and the betrayal. It can be overwhelming. And sometimes, the only way to reclaim control is through decisive action. Her decision to sign the papers was reportedly not made lightly. Sources close to Meghan describe a woman who had weighed her options carefully, who had anticipated the legal and emotional consequences, and who finally determined that this was the only way forward. There's a quiet ferocity in such decisions, a blend of pragmatism and emotion, of necessity and defiance. And as the ink dried, a new chapter began, one that would challenge not just the couple, but the institution that had once been their home. Meanwhile, Harry was facing his own storm. Returning to the UK had been a subject of private debate for months, even years. The California life had given him freedom, but at a cost: distance from family, unresolved tensions, and a lingering sense of responsibility. The prospect of returning was fraught with risk. Every move would be scrutinized, every word parsed, every appearance politicized. And yet, the pull of the UK, the place of his birth, his childhood, his identity, remained strong. Behind the scenes, advisors and palace insiders were reportedly mobilizing. Emergency meetings, confidential calls, and strategic planning sessions were taking place in rapid succession. Everyone knew the stakes. Public perception could either vilify or sympathize, and the monarchy's image was hanging in a delicate balance. One leak, one misstep, one poorly timed statement could send the narrative spiraling out of control. And then there's the media, the ever-present, ever-hungry force in this saga. From tabloids to social media platforms, the story of Meghan signing divorce papers exploded overnight. Headlines ranged from the sympathetic to the scandalous, and public reactions spanned shock, outrage, and speculation. Every meme, every tweet, every viral video added another layer to the narrative. But beneath the spectacle, a deeper story was unfolding, one that involved power, control, loyalty, and betrayal. The emotional toll on both Meghan and Harry cannot be overstated. Legal documents, press scrutiny, and family tensions aside, this is a deeply personal upheaval. Relationships are strained, trust is fractured, and the future is uncertain. The stakes are not just about headlines or public opinion. They're about identity, legacy, and the very definition of family. Even within the palace, the fallout was intense. Advisors reportedly debated strategy late into the night. Who would make statements? What tone should be used? How much should be revealed? And how much should remain confidential? Every word mattered, every gesture counted, and the weight of history hung heavily over every decision. But the public, always hungry for insight, was left with questions. How would Harry respond? Would Meghan maintain her independence or attempt reconciliation? And what about the children, Archie and Lilibet? How would they navigate this shifting landscape? And what would be the long-term consequences of such a high-profile divorce? Then there's the psychological dimension. Divorce, especially one so public, brings profound emotional challenges. Anger, relief, guilt, and liberation all intertwine. For Meghan, signing the papers was an act of agency, a reclaiming of control over her life and her narrative. For Harry, contemplating a return to the UK was both a step toward reconciling with family and a confrontation with unresolved tensions. Every choice is loaded, every move is consequential, and the potential for unforeseen consequences is enormous. The legal dimension adds another layer of complexity. Divorce settlements in ordinary circumstances are complicated. In this case, they are unprecedented. Trust funds, royal assets, private properties, and future financial arrangements are all entangled in a web of tradition, legal precedent, and personal stakes. Advisors, lawyers, and financial experts are reportedly working around the clock to navigate this maze. Every clause, every stipulation, every condition carries potential leverage and potential disaster. But perhaps the most striking aspect of this unfolding drama is the intersection of the personal and the public. Harry and Meghan's lives have always been under scrutiny, but now, the lines between private decision and public spectacle are blurrier than ever. Every action feeds headlines, every statement shapes opinion, and every emotional reaction becomes content for debate. The question is no longer simply about love or marriage. It is about influence, legacy, and the balance of power within the monarchy itself. And just when it seemed the story couldn't get more complicated, the children enter the narrative in ways that heighten the stakes. Custody, public appearances, and education are no longer private matters. They are matters of public interest. Every decision regarding their lives will be examined, criticized, and speculated upon. And as the world watches, the pressure mounts. So what comes next? Will Harry's potential return stabilize the situation, or will it ignite new conflicts? Will Meghan's decisive action lead to empowerment or unforeseen challenges? And how will the palace respond to this unprecedented scenario, where loyalty, duty, and love collide in ways no one anticipated? Why would Prince Harry, the royal who famously stepped back from royal duties, even consider returning to the United Kingdom now? After years of building a life away from the relentless glare of Buckingham Palace and tabloid scrutiny, the idea of returning seems, on the surface, contradictory. And yet, as Meghan finalized the divorce papers in California, whispers began circulating among palace insiders. Harry is thinking about going back. but not just for public appearances. He may be planning a full return. Imagine the tension. Harry, once the carefree prince, suddenly confronted with the possibility of navigating not only the legal fallout of a high-profile divorce, but also the intricate politics of his own family. The palace, which had once been a safe, familiar space, now feels like a minefield. Advisors and aides reportedly have mixed opinions, some urging caution, others quietly hoping he'll come back to help stabilize the family image. And Harry himself? He's caught between longing for connection, sense of duty, and the very real fear of being drawn back into a storm he spent years escaping. The motivations behind his potential return are complex. One is undoubtedly family. Despite the fractured relationships, Harry remains deeply connected to his father, King Charles, and his brother, Prince William. There's an innate pull toward home, toward the people and institutions that shaped his life. But it's not simple nostalgia. It's also about responsibility. The monarchy is under pressure like never before. Scandals, public opinion, and internal disagreements threaten its stability. Harry's return could be framed as a move to protect legacy, restore balance, or simply reconnect with his roots. Then there's the strategic element. Palace insiders suggest that Harry is not planning a quiet visit. His return would likely involve careful negotiations. Security arrangements, media strategy, timing, and the optics of his re-entry. Every detail must be calibrated to perfection. A misstep could overshadow the very purpose of his return, painting him as either opportunistic or powerless. He knows this. He has experienced firsthand how quickly public perception can twist intentions. But there's a personal layer that is far more revealing. Harry's California life, while free, is also isolating. Away from the constant surveillance of the UK press, he enjoys privacy, but at a cost. Family ties grow distant, relationships strain, and there's a gnawing sense of unfinished business. Returning may offer him a chance to repair those connections, to assert influence, or even to redefine his role within the royal family on his own terms. And this is where the tension builds. Can he return without compromising the independence he fought so hard to achieve? In private conversations, sources suggest that Harry has been carefully evaluating timing. He's waiting for the right moment, after Meghan's divorce papers are signed, when public attention is at its peak, and when his return could carry maximum impact. This is not a spontaneous decision. It is calculated, deliberate, and emotionally charged. Every potential scenario is weighed. The reaction of the king, the response from William, the response of palace staff, and the inevitable scrutiny of the media. The question of Meghan looms large. Will Harry return alone, or will he coordinate some level of collaboration with her? Their paths are diverging legally, but emotionally, the bonds are not so easily severed. Advisors reportedly speculate that Harry's return could be partly motivated by a desire to support Meghan in managing the fallout, even from a distance. This creates a dramatic tension, loyalty to a spouse versus loyalty to family, autonomy versus duty. The logistics alone are daunting. A high-profile visit to the UK is not a simple flight across the Atlantic. Security, public appearances, media control, and private family meetings must all be coordinated. Rumors suggest that advisors have been running simulations, where he could stay, who he should meet first, and how to manage potential confrontations. Every interaction must be carefully choreographed, from the moment he steps off the plane to the last public statement he makes. One wrong move could escalate tensions beyond repair. Public perception is another critical factor. The world has been watching Harry's every move since his exit from royal duties. Any return, even temporary, would be scrutinized relentlessly. Would he be welcomed as a prince returning home, or criticized as a man who abandoned his responsibilities only to come back when convenient? The stakes are enormous, and the pressure is unrelenting. But perhaps the most dramatic element is the tension between secrecy and revelation. Harry reportedly wants his plans to remain confidential until the moment is strategically right. Yet, in the age of social media and leaks, absolute secrecy is nearly impossible. Every conversation, every flight, every meeting could potentially become public knowledge before he even arrives. This adds a layer of suspense. How will he control the narrative when the world is watching and waiting? And then there's the emotional weight. Imagine standing in the place where you grew up, where your childhood memories are intertwined with tradition, expectation, and family bonds. You return not as the carefree prince you once were, but as a man tempered by experience, struggle, and public scrutiny. The palace is familiar, yet different. The people are familiar, yet distant. Every hallway, every room, every corridor carries the weight of history and personal memories. The emotional stakes are as high as the public ones, and every decision carries the potential to reshape relationships for years to come. Advisors reportedly have mixed feelings. Some are optimistic, viewing Harry's potential return as a stabilizing force for the monarchy. Others are cautious, warning that old tensions could resurface, that media narratives could spiral, and that personal dynamics could trigger unforeseen conflicts. The situation is delicate. Every move matters. And Harry, navigating his own emotions, public expectations, and family pressures, must tread carefully. But what if the return isn't just about family or public perception? Some insiders suggest it could be a strategic move for long-term positioning within the royal hierarchy. By reasserting presence, Harry could influence succession discussions, policy decisions, or charitable initiatives. As Harry weighs these decisions, one undeniable truth emerges. The clock is ticking. Media attention is relentless, public interest is soaring, and the palace is on high alert. Every moment of delay increases speculation, fuels rumors, and magnifies pressure. The decision to return is not just personal. It is political, symbolic, and transformative. And as the world watches, Harry's next move will set the stage for months, if not years, of drama, conflict, and revelation. What drives a woman to sign divorce papers with both fury and purpose blazing in her veins? For Meghan Markle, this was not a rash decision, nor an impulsive act. It was the culmination of years of scrutiny, emotional strain, and battles waged in both public and private arenas. Behind that pen, behind the ink that would formalize her split from Prince Harry, lay a storm of emotions that few could comprehend, let alone withstand. Let's rewind to the months leading up to that moment. Meghan had spent years navigating the impossible balance between her personal ambitions, her family life, and the unyielding expectations of the British monarchy. Every public appearance was dissected. Every smile, every comment, every glance became fodder for tabloids, social media, and gossip columns. What started as admiration for her grace and poise gradually morphed into relentless criticism, with the media framing her as either too ambitious or too assertive, too American, too outspoken, or too distant from royal protocol. This scrutiny was not abstract. It was deeply personal. Sources close to Meghan described sleepless nights, private battles with anxiety, and the constant pressure to prove herself worthy of the royal title. It is one thing to face criticism in the public eye, but quite another when the judgment comes from a system designed to govern your life, dictate your actions, and influence your every decision. Over time, that pressure builds, not gradually, but cumulatively, until it erupts into decisive action. And erupt it did. Signing those divorce papers was more than legal procedure. It was a statement, a refusal to be controlled, manipulated, or silenced. A declaration of independence, not just from her husband, but from an institution that had both embraced and constrained her. Emotional intensity surged during this period. Anger was intertwined with relief. Frustration met with empowerment. Every signature was more than just ink. It was reclamation, defiance, and resolution. But the papers themselves were not simple. Legal documents of this magnitude, involving wealth, properties, public and private assets, and future entitlements, are complex. Each clause carries strategic weight. Each line holds potential consequences. According to insiders, Meghan meticulously reviewed every detail, ensuring that the agreements not only protected her legally, but also symbolically. This was about control, but it was also about narrative, shaping the story on her terms, not someone else's. The timing of her decision was crucial. Publicly, the world was focused on Harry's potential return to the UK, a distraction that allowed Meghan's move to carry maximum impact without immediate backlash. Privately, the move allowed her to assert agency at a moment when it mattered most. There is an art to timing in high-stakes situations, and Meghan, for all the scrutiny and controversy, understood this perfectly. Every act, every decision, every signature was calculated with precision. Emotionally, this period was turbulent. Friends report that Meghan experienced waves of anger, sadness, and determination. She had been under immense pressure to maintain appearances, to project grace, and to endure criticism with composure. Yet behind the scenes, the reality was far more raw. A woman grappling with exhaustion, frustration, and a fierce desire to protect her family while preserving her own dignity. Every step was a balancing act between emotion and strategy, vulnerability and resolve. The palace, of course, was not oblivious to her intentions. Advisors, courtiers, and even members of the royal family were reportedly monitoring her movements, anticipating legal maneuvers, and strategizing responses. Some were wary, fearing the potential public relations nightmare. Others were indifferent, believing the couple had already distanced themselves far enough to make internal opinion irrelevant. But Meghan's signature changed everything. It was a formal act with immediate consequences, rippling through corridors, offices, and private chambers across London. Behind the public headlines and legal paperwork, there was also a human story. Meghan, despite the criticism, had built a life of resilience. She had forged connections, engaged in philanthropy, and pursued her passions, all while under constant observation. Yet, even with her accomplishments, she faced criticism for everything from her wardrobe choices to her perceived influence over Harry. For many, this relentless scrutiny could be enough to break someone. For Meghan, it became fuel. Fuel to assert control, fuel to define her own narrative, fuel to reclaim agency over her life. What makes this moment so striking is the combination of emotion and strategy. This was not an act of blind anger, nor of purely calculated maneuvering. It was a blend of both, a calculated decision made with intense emotional conviction. This is what separates decisive leadership from impulsive reaction. Understanding the stakes, analyzing the consequences, and acting with a clarity forged in the fire of personal experience. There is also the matter of perception. Meghan knows that her every action will be analyzed, dissected, and interpreted by millions. She knows that her signature will be scrutinized not just for its legal implications, but for what it says about her as a person. And yet, she chose to act anyway, demonstrating courage in the face of scrutiny and decisiveness when hesitation could have been safer. The divorce papers also reveal subtle dynamics between Meghan and Harry. While their paths are diverging legally, emotionally, and publicly, the bond between them is complex and enduring. Friends suggest that Harry was supportive of the decision, understanding that it was necessary for Meghan to reclaim control over her life and narrative. But this support does not diminish the tension, the challenges, or the potential for conflict. In fact, it may heighten it, as both navigate the delicate intersection of personal choice, legal realities, and public perception. And yet, even as the divorce was formalized, new tensions emerged. Sources indicate that clauses within the agreement raised unexpected complications, disputes over property, financial arrangements, and media control. Advisors on both sides were reportedly in near constant communication, negotiating terms, adjusting language, and trying to anticipate every possible scenario. Every minor detail held the potential to escalate into major controversy, and Meghan's team was determined to ensure her interests were protected. The public, of course, had its own interpretations. Headlines ranged from outrage to admiration, sympathy to cynicism. Every news outlet, every social media post, every viral discussion contributed to a narrative that was beyond Meghan's control. And yet, her act of signing the papers imposed some measure of control, asserting that her voice and agency could not be ignored, even if the world tried. But perhaps the most compelling aspect of this period is the psychological tension. Signing divorce papers is inherently final. It signals closure, but it also opens new doors of uncertainty. Meghan was aware that her decision would have far-reaching consequences. Relationships strained, family dynamics altered, public scrutiny intensified, and personal freedoms redefined. The weight of such a decision is enormous, yet she embraced it with resolve. And just when it seemed that the immediate drama of the signature had passed, another revelation surfaced. Hidden clauses, strategic decisions, and unanticipated consequences began to emerge, details that could reshape not only Meghan's path, but Harry's, the monarchy's, and the public's understanding of the situation. The signature, while decisive, was only the opening act in a drama that was far from over. Whispers behind closed doors, urgent phone calls, hushed meetings in the grand corridors of Buckingham Palace. When Meghan Markle signed those divorce papers, the ripple effect wasn't just emotional. It was strategic, political, and profoundly disruptive. Advisors, who had once been spectators in the unfolding drama, were suddenly thrust into a high-stakes game where every move mattered, every decision carried consequences, and every leak could ignite public outrage. The royal advisory system, while experienced in handling scandals, had rarely confronted a situation quite like this. Divorce in the royal family is not just a personal matter. It touches on tradition, protocol, public image, and succession narratives. And when the parties involved are Harry, the prince who once defied convention, and Meghan, the woman whose life has been intensely scrutinized from day one, the stakes multiply exponentially. Inside the palace, the reactions were varied and intense. Some advisors were reportedly shocked, taken aback by the speed and decisiveness of Meghan's move. "We expected tension, but not this," one insider allegedly whispered. Others were pragmatic, immediately calculating the potential fallout. Media narratives, public sympathy, the timing of Harry's return, and the long-term implications for the monarchy. Every detail mattered, from the wording of official statements to the optics of private meetings. One of the first priorities was messaging. How should the palace publicly acknowledge the divorce without inflaming the media? How could they express neutrality, protect the monarchy's image, and avoid taking sides, all while maintaining the appearance of grace and control? Advisors pored over drafts, debating every nuance. Every word, every comma, every public gesture was analyzed for its potential impact. In a family where tradition is paramount, deviation is scrutinized more harshly than rebellion. But the advisors faced a dilemma. The public is relentless. The media thrives on scandal. Social media amplifies every reaction. And in the age of 24/7 coverage, controlling the narrative is a nearly impossible task. Advisors had to weigh transparency against discretion, public opinion against private strategy, and short-term crisis management against long-term consequences. Each decision was a gamble with enormous stakes. Internally, tensions ran high. Senior advisors debated the potential outcomes of Harry's return, Meghan's legal maneuvering, and the media storm. Some argued for a firm stance, maintain distance, let the couple handle their personal matters, and preserve the monarchy's dignity. Others urged proactive engagement, anticipate the narrative, control the leaks, and strategically manage public perception. The conversations were reportedly heated, with voices raised in the palace halls and urgent phone calls punctuating the quiet of night. The advisors' anxiety was not unfounded. Royal history is littered with examples where inaction or miscalculation led to reputational damage. From Edward VIII's abdication to Diana's tragic saga, the lessons are clear. Timing, messaging, and public perception are critical. In Meghan and Harry's case, the calculus was even more complicated because the divorce was paired with a potential return, a combination that could exacerbate tension, fan media speculation, and challenge the monarchy's authority. Beyond strategic considerations, there was a deeply human element. Advisors reportedly understood that behind the legal documents and public statements were intense emotions: anger, hurt, disappointment, and defiance. They had to navigate these human dynamics while balancing protocol, public expectations, and the pressures of history. It's a tightrope walk few could manage without missteps. One surprising detail, revealed by insiders, is the extent of preparation behind closed doors. Advisors had contingency plans for multiple scenarios. What if the public backlash favored Meghan? What if Harry's return was seen as opportunistic? What if media coverage spiraled into a frenzy? Every possible outcome had been considered, analyzed, and counter-strategized. And yet, despite all this planning, advisors reportedly admitted that the unpredictability of human behavior and public reaction meant that no plan could be foolproof. The psychological pressure on the advisors themselves cannot be understated. Royal advisors are trained to manage crises, but this situation tested their skills in unprecedented ways. They were responsible not only for mitigating immediate damage, but also for preserving long-term credibility and influence of the monarchy. Every statement they drafted, every action they recommended, and every word they communicated could affect the legacy of the family for decades. The media dimension added another layer of intensity. Leaks, speculation, and viral commentary put advisors under constant pressure. Every newspaper headline, social media post, and televised commentary had to be analyzed for tone, impact, and potential consequences. The advisors found themselves in a continuous loop, responding, reassessing, and recalibrating in real time. Their role had shifted from behind-the-scenes counselors to crisis managers, balancing legal, emotional, and reputational stakes simultaneously. Even within the royal family, tensions escalated. Advisors had to navigate delicate relationships, mediate disputes, and anticipate potential conflicts. Every conversation with family members carried the weight of history, emotion, and strategic importance. Advisors were no longer just strategists. They were mediators, negotiators, and, at times, protectors of the monarchy's public image. The palace's internal communications reportedly became a whirlwind of urgency. Messages flew between London and California, between legal teams and communications staff, all coordinated to manage both the reality of the divorce and the optics of Harry's potential return. The coordination required precision, timing, and discretion, with no room for error. But there was an even more dramatic element at play: the advisors' own personal stakes. Many had served the royal family for decades, witnessing triumphs, scandals, and crises. Their reputations, careers, and credibility were tied to the monarchy's stability. The divorce was not just a royal matter. It was a test of their own ability to navigate chaos, manage perception, and protect an institution that depended on discretion and skill. As the advisors debated, planned, and prepared, they also faced a harsh reality. Meghan and Harry were acting with independence, sometimes unpredictably. The couple's decisions could not always be anticipated, and the advisors had to constantly adapt, recalibrate, and respond. Their role was less about control and more about mitigation, guidance, and strategic intervention. And then came a revelation that reportedly stunned even the most seasoned advisors. Hidden clauses in Meghan's divorce documents, carefully designed to assert control over media narratives and public appearances, had strategic implications the palace had not fully anticipated. This wasn't just about legal settlements. It was a subtle, calculated assertion of influence. Advisors realized they were now playing defense on multiple fronts, against both public perception and private strategy. The combination of personal emotion, legal maneuvering, and public scrutiny created a perfect storm. Advisors were forced to anticipate not just what Meghan and Harry might do, but how the public, the press, and global opinion would respond. Every decision, every recommendation, carried layers of consequence, amplifying the tension within the palace walls. Yet, despite all the planning, the advisors could not fully predict the next twist. Every day brought new developments, new leaks, and new surprises. And as the world watched with bated breath, the advisors realized one unshakable truth. The monarchy was navigating uncharted territory, and the consequences of miscalculation could be historic. When Meghan Markle signed those divorce papers, the world didn't just notice, it erupted. Headlines exploded across newspapers, TV broadcasts, and social media feeds. Divorced and defiant, one tabloid screamed. Royal rift worsens, declared another. Within hours, the news became the global conversation, dominating trending topics, opinion columns, and gossip circles. But the real story wasn't just the divorce itself. It was how the media frenzy magnified, distorted, and weaponized every element of the unfolding drama. The reaction was immediate. From London to Los Angeles, newsrooms scrambled to cover every angle. The legal implications, the emotional fallout, and, most provocatively, Harry's potential return to the UK. Analysts dissected every detail, from the exact wording of statements to the timing of public appearances. Headlines weren't just informing. They were shaping perception, influencing public sentiment, and escalating tension between the couple and the monarchy. Social media amplified the intensity exponentially. Platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok became battlegrounds for opinion, speculation, and viral commentary. Fans and critics alike debated the narrative endlessly. Some expressed sympathy for Meghan, praising her courage and agency. Others criticized her actions, accusing her of manipulation or ambition. Every meme, every viral post, every trending hashtag fed the frenzy, creating a feedback loop of attention and scrutiny. The media didn't stop at reporting facts. They interpreted, exaggerated, and sensationalized. Every minor detail of Meghan and Harry's lives became fodder for storytelling. Their past public appearances were reframed in light of the divorce. Interviews, speeches, and philanthropic work were re-examined for hidden meaning or intent. The coverage blurred the line between reality and narrative, presenting the couple's lives as a continuous, unfolding drama rather than a private family matter. Traditional news outlets and tabloids approached the story differently, but both had the same effect, shaping public perception. The tabloids, with their eye-catching headlines and sensational claims, focused on conflict, scandal, and speculation. Reputable outlets, while more measured, still analyzed implications, motives, and the broader impact on the monarchy. Both forms of coverage contributed to a sense of urgency, tension, and drama that engulfed the public imagination. Public opinion was as divided as the media coverage. Polls and surveys revealed contrasting sentiments. In some circles, Meghan was hailed as a strong, independent woman asserting control over her life. In others, she was criticized as disruptive, ambitious, or disloyal. Harry, too, became a subject of debate. Some praised his loyalty and courage, others questioned his decisions and timing. Every headline, tweet, and news segment fed into a polarized public conversation, intensifying scrutiny and pressure on the couple. The frenzy wasn't just limited to words, it affected visuals as well. Paparazzi intensified coverage, tracking movements, appearances, and meetings. Photographs of Meghan signing documents, Harry traveling, and the children's schooling or public absence were circulated widely. Every image became a statement, analyzed for tone, emotion, and narrative implications. Even minor gestures, like a smile or a glance, were scrutinized, with media outlets attributing strategic meaning or emotional subtext. International media added another layer of complexity. News outlets in Europe, North America, and beyond covered the story relentlessly, offering speculation, commentary, and analysis. The monarchy, once a primarily British institution, faced global scrutiny on an unprecedented scale. Every action taken by Meghan and Harry had the potential to reverberate worldwide, influencing international perception, diplomacy, and cultural narratives about royalty. Amid the frenzy, misinformation spread rapidly. Unverified claims, rumors, and leaks circulated widely, further complicating the narrative. Social media, while providing immediacy, also amplified inaccuracies. Advisors and legal teams reportedly had to address false reports, clarify details, and attempt to control the narrative in real time. The sheer velocity of information and misinformation created a chaotic environment that required constant vigilance. Interestingly, the media frenzy had psychological consequences for the public as well. Audiences were drawn into the emotional highs and lows of Meghan and Harry's story, experiencing vicarious tension, empathy, or outrage. The divorce became more than a personal matter. It became a public spectacle, a narrative that allowed people to project their own values, biases, and emotional responses onto the couple's lives. Meghan and Harry themselves were acutely aware of this dynamic. Sources suggest they monitored coverage closely, understanding both the risks and opportunities. Meghan, in particular, was said to be strategic about which narratives to counter and which to allow to unfold, leveraging media attention to assert agency and control. Harry, meanwhile, considered how the frenzy might affect his potential return, evaluating timing, optics, and public sentiment. The public's reaction, amplified by media, also created pressure on the palace. Advisors were inundated with questions, guidance, and contingency planning. Every official statement was crafted with the knowledge that it would be dissected for tone, meaning, and potential consequences. The palace had to navigate a delicate balance, respect the couple's privacy while maintaining institutional dignity, project calm while managing internal turmoil, and anticipate the next wave of media scrutiny before it even arrived. What makes this chapter of the story so compelling is the interplay between perception and reality. The media frenzy shaped public understanding, but it did not always reflect the truth behind the decisions. Meghan's signing of the papers, Harry's potential return, and the advisor's strategies were filtered through layers of interpretation, exaggeration, and speculation. The result was a narrative that was part reality, part performance, and part public imagination. A complex web that influenced both the couple and the monarchy. And as the frenzy reached a fever pitch, a new complication emerged. A leaked detail about the divorce papers suggested clauses designed to protect Meghan's control over media narratives, appearances, and statements. This revelation, widely reported, sparked intense debate. Was this strategic genius, bold defiance, or an overreach? The leak intensified scrutiny, forcing both the palace and the couple to adjust strategies on the fly. The frenzy also heightened anticipation for Harry's next move. Every story about Meghan's actions fueled speculation about how Harry might respond. Will he return to the UK immediately? Will he issue a statement? Will he attempt reconciliation or assert independence? Each headline, tweet, and article raised the stakes, creating an environment of tension, uncertainty, and relentless public attention. But just when it seemed the narrative had reached a climax, another revelation surfaced. One that threatened to eclipse everything the media had already covered. Hidden strategies, undisclosed decisions, and calculated moves behind closed doors hinted that the drama was far from over. The media frenzy, while intense, was only the surface layer of a far more complex story, one that would continue to shock, surprise, and captivate audiences around the world. What goes through the mind of a monarch when the private lives of his own family become public spectacle? For King Charles, Meghan Markle signing divorce papers was not just a personal disappointment. It was a strategic, emotional, and political crisis all at once. As the reigning monarch, he must navigate duty, legacy, and public perception, while also wrestling with family dynamics that are intensely personal and emotionally charged. Charles's dilemma is unlike any ordinary parent's. The monarchy comes with expectations, scrutiny, and tradition that few can comprehend. Every decision carries historical weight, every statement is analyzed, and every emotional reaction has the potential to ripple across the globe. For a king, the stakes are not simply personal, they are institutional. Charles must balance his love for his son, his respect for his daughter-in-law, and the duties of his crown, all while under relentless public and media scrutiny. The signing of the divorce papers, however, changed the landscape dramatically. It signaled a finality that could not be ignored. Advisors reportedly flooded the palace with briefings, updates, and analyses, assessing the impact on public opinion, legal implications, and family relations. Every detail mattered: the timing, the optics, the wording of statements, and potential future moves. For Charles, the personal and institutional collided with unprecedented intensity. Emotionally, the situation was a storm. A father watching his son and daughter-in-law navigate a highly public separation must contend with love, worry, frustration, and even helplessness. Charles reportedly experienced a mix of emotions: anger at the public spectacle, concern for his grandchildren, and an acute awareness of the monarchy's reputation. For him, this was not just a family issue. It was a crisis of leadership, a challenge to the stability of the institution he represents. The timing couldn't have been worse. The global media frenzy, the polarized public opinion, and Harry's potential return created layers of complexity that required careful consideration. Charles must weigh every decision: what to say publicly, what to manage privately, and how to project authority without alienating family members. Every choice carries consequences, not just for his reign, but for the perception of the monarchy worldwide. Political advisors within the palace reportedly briefed Charles on multiple scenarios. How would the public respond to Harry returning? How could the palace control narratives surrounding Meghan's legal maneuvering? What impact would this have on other royal family members, the government, and international relations. Each briefing layered on another level of complexity, forcing Charles to consider not only family dynamics, but broader institutional consequences. At the heart of Charles's dilemma is trust. The king must navigate relationships fractured by distance, miscommunication, and differing priorities. Harry's independence, Meghan's assertiveness, and the influence of advisors outside the palace create a delicate balancing act. Charles reportedly struggled with knowing when to intervene, when to step back, and how to support his family while maintaining his responsibilities as monarch. The king's advisors faced the daunting task of guiding him through the media storm. Each recommendation involved weighing optics against emotion. Should he issue a statement expressing concern? Should he stay silent and let events unfold? Should he focus on the children, the institution, or the couple's autonomy? There were no simple answers, only calculated risks and careful judgment calls. Meanwhile, Charles's personal reflections reportedly included concern for the children, Archie and Lilibet. How would they process this high-profile divorce? How could he support their well-being amid media frenzy and family tension? These questions added an emotional weight that was both immediate and enduring. The responsibilities of a king collide with those of a father, creating a pressure unlike any ordinary circumstance. Public opinion weighed heavily on Charles's mind. Monarchs cannot ignore perception. Legitimacy is tied to public trust. Advisors warned that any misstep could damage the monarchy's image, fuel criticism, or provoke further scandal. Every appearance, speech, or interaction had to be considered carefully, balancing transparency, authority, and emotional authenticity. The king's dilemma was amplified by the fact that the public is no longer passive. They participate, comment, and influence discourse in real time through media and social platforms. Reports suggest that Charles also grappled with strategic planning. Meghan's legal actions, Harry's potential return, and the global attention meant the palace had to anticipate moves months in advance. Decisions were not just reactive, they were preemptive, attempting to shape outcomes while responding to unpredictable developments. The king's role became a constant negotiation between leadership, family loyalty, and public expectation. Despite the pressure, Charles reportedly showed resilience. Advisors describe him as deeply reflective, weighing both human and institutional implications. He understood the stakes. Mishandling the situation could exacerbate familial estrangement, erode public confidence, and destabilize the monarchy's carefully maintained balance. At the same time, he had to preserve dignity, control narrative, and manage optics without appearing cold or detached. Underlying all this was a personal struggle. Charles, as a father, desires connection and reconciliation. As a king, he is bound by duty, protocol, and tradition. The divorce papers, Harry's potential return, and the media frenzy forced him to confront conflicting responsibilities simultaneously. He had to reconcile personal loyalty with public duty, emotional response with strategic thinking, and private relationships with institutional legacy. The tension reached a peak when advisors presented him with new intelligence. Potential clauses in Meghan's divorce that could influence media control, public appearances, and future interactions with Harry. These details, while legal, had profound implications for public perception, timing, and palace strategy. The king realized that the situation was no longer just about a family matter. It was a complex, multi-layered challenge impacting legacy, public trust, and institutional integrity. Charles's dilemma was further complicated by Harry's indecision about returning to the UK. Advisors suggested that a carefully timed return could stabilize the family narrative or ignite further controversy. Charles had to decide, should he encourage reconciliation, maintain distance, or prepare for confrontation? Each option carried risk and none guaranteed resolution. As he deliberated, Charles reportedly reflected on history. The monarchy has survived scandals before, but the digital age amplified every detail, every decision, and every misstep. In this environment, the margin for error is minimal and the consequences are magnified. Charles faced the dual challenge of managing immediate crises while safeguarding long-term legacy. And just when it seemed the king had assessed every angle, an unexpected development emerged. A private message, leaked document, or sudden revelation threatened to upend his careful calculations, an event that would force Charles to confront a truth he had not anticipated and make a decision that could change the course of the royal family forever. While the world focused on Meghan signing the divorce papers and Harry weighing a return to the UK, behind the palace walls, the Queen was quietly orchestrating moves that few even suspected. Known for her strategic mind, emotional intelligence, and unwavering dedication to the monarchy, she had always understood the delicate balance between public perception, family dynamics, and the long-term survival of the crown. Now, in this unprecedented situation, her influence was both subtle and decisive, a silent force shaping outcomes without drawing attention to herself. The Queen's approach was methodical. She observed. She listened. She gathered intelligence from advisors, courtiers, and even unofficial sources. Every whisper in the corridors of Buckingham Palace, every leak in the media, every social media storm was catalogued, analyzed, and interpreted. Unlike the overt drama surrounding Meghan and Harry, the Queen's actions were deliberate, invisible, and strategic, intended to shape events without becoming the center of controversy herself. One of her primary concerns was maintaining family cohesion, even as relationships strained to the breaking point. While Harry's potential return raised alarms, and Meghan's assertiveness complicated negotiations, the Queen understood that appearances matter as much as reality. Public perception could not be allowed to spiral into a narrative of chaos or familial collapse. For decades, she had mastered the art of projecting calm and continuity, even during crises that threatened to undermine the monarchy. Sources suggest that the Queen convened secret meetings with senior advisors, exploring every possible outcome and contingency plan. She considered scenarios ranging from Harry's immediate return to Meghan's legal maneuvers, from public backlash to internal dissent. Each option was weighed carefully, with attention to timing, optics, and long-term consequences. In private, she reportedly emphasized discretion, patience, and strategic patience, a reminder that in the monarchy, slow, deliberate action often yields more influence than immediate reaction. But the Queen's moves were not purely reactive. Reports indicate she took proactive steps to secure her influence over both family and institution. Communication strategies were subtly adjusted, public appearances timed to reinforce stability, and advisors instructed to monitor the narrative closely. Even minor gestures, an appearance at a charitable event, a carefully phrased statement, or an informal conversation with a family member, were part of a broader strategy designed to shape perception and maintain authority. A critical aspect of her approach involved understanding the motivations of both Harry and Meghan. Unlike advisors who viewed the situation through the lens of protocol, the Queen considered their emotional and psychological states. She recognized Meghan's desire for agency and Harry's internal conflict between independence and family loyalty. By anticipating their moves and understanding their perspectives, she could influence outcomes without overt confrontation, a subtle power play that few outside the palace could detect. At the same time, the Queen was acutely aware of the public's role in this drama. Social media sentiment, media coverage, and public opinion were all variables she considered. A poorly timed statement or an unsanctioned leak could exacerbate tensions, undermine authority, or embolden critics. Her strategy required balancing the immediate demands of a family crisis with the long-term needs of the monarchy, a task requiring both patience and precision. Interestingly, some advisors reportedly underestimated the Queen's influence. While the palace reacted to Meghan and Harry's actions in real time, she remained several steps ahead, quietly maneuvering behind the scenes. She understood the power of timing, when to act, when to withhold, and when to allow events to unfold naturally. This patience, combined with a deep understanding of both family psychology and institutional dynamics, gave her an advantage that no other player possessed. One of the Queen's most significant moves involved controlling the narrative around Harry's potential return. Sources suggest that she discreetly guided advisors on messaging, public statements, and interactions with the media. By shaping the narrative subtly, she ensured that any return by Harry would be framed within the context of family duty, reconciliation, and monarchy stability, rather than rebellion or personal ambition. Her goal was clear: to protect the crown, the institution, and the family simultaneously. Her strategic mindset extended beyond immediate events. She reportedly considered the long-term implications of Meghan's divorce, Harry's independence, and public perception. Every action was measured not just for immediate impact, but for legacy, how history would remember the monarchy, how the public would interpret the family's unity, and how future generations of royals would navigate similar crises. At the same time, the Queen was not merely playing a defensive game. She reportedly took steps to strengthen alliances within the family, ensuring that key relationships between her, William, and other senior royals remained resilient. These alliances were crucial for maintaining stability, coordinating public messaging, and managing the fallout from both Meghan's legal maneuvers and Harry's potential return. Emotionally, the Queen's position was complex. She was a grandmother, observing the impact of these events on her grandchildren, a mother, considering the strains on her family, and a sovereign, responsible for the monarchy's continuity and reputation. Balancing these roles required an extraordinary combination of empathy, patience, and strategic thinking. Her ability to navigate this emotional complexity while remaining focused on long-term outcomes highlights the unique challenges faced by a monarch in crisis. Yet, despite her careful planning, the Queen was also preparing for unpredictability. Advisors reportedly warned her that Meghan and Harry's actions could be unexpected, rapid, or disruptive. In response, she implemented contingency plans, secret protocols, private communications channels, and strategic interventions designed to respond to emerging crises without drawing public attention. Every possibility was considered, every scenario rehearsed, and every action measured for both immediate and lasting impact. The Queen's moves were about more than just control. They were about shaping reality in a way that preserved the monarchy's dignity, protected the family, and managed public perception. While Meghan and Harry's story dominated headlines, her quiet influence ensured that the institution remained resilient, the narrative contained, and the legacy secure. And then, just as the Queen seemed to have anticipated every variable, a new development emerged that threatened to challenge her careful strategy. A revelation, hidden in plain sight, suggested that Meghan and Harry had plans that could circumvent even the Queen's subtle interventions, plans that could ignite the media, divide the family, and destabilize the palace in ways no one had predicted. The divorce papers were signed. The media frenzy had reached a fever pitch. Harry's potential return loomed over the monarchy. And yet, beneath the surface, tensions that had long simmered quietly within the royal family were about to erupt in ways nobody could have anticipated. These weren't public disputes or media-fueled narratives. They were raw, private, and deeply personal conflicts that had been accumulating over years. Royal families are often portrayed as unified, stately, and composed. But the reality behind palace walls is far more complicated. Loyalties are tested, alliances shift, and resentment can fester for decades. For Charles, the tension between maintaining authority and nurturing familial bonds was an ongoing struggle. For William, it was a